Thank you for joining us for the 2022 Divergent Award Lecture Series as part of the Initiative for Literacy in a Digital Age Research. Today, we're joined by several of the 2022 Divergent Award honorees who are coming together to share in conversation around a topic important to the work that we do as educators, scholars, and practitioners. The Initiative for Literacy in the Digital Age is supported by the Kim and Chuck Watson Endowed Chair in Education at Oklahoma State University. Joining us today are Clarice Moran. Clarice, how are you doing? Can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be a part of this and truly humbled and honored. I'm an assistant professor at Appalachian State University in beautiful Boone, North Carolina. I have been a high school and middle school English teacher, and I have 3 kids. I don't know, what else do you want to know about me?
Oh, we're going to dig far into your past, Clarice. It's good to have you here. We're also joined by Mary Rice. Mary, how are you doing and where are you tuning in from?
Hi, I am coming in from sunny Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I am an assistant professor of literacy there at the University of New Mexico, and I'm glad to be here. It's very exciting. So I taught school for a long time. So grades 7 through 9 mostly, but the youngest kids I worked with were 3rd graders and the oldest ones all the way up into high school, because I was in English as a second language teacher. And then I also did the reading support classes, which were sort of a weaving lane between special education and general education. And then I taught honors as well. So I did a lot of stuff within teaching English language arts. And then, but my research now focuses on access and accessibility in digital settings. And I do a lot of my research with teachers who are working with students with disabilities, and also some even with English learners. So glad to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Also joining us is Bill Bass. Bill, how are you doing today and where are you joining us from?
Hey, Ian, I'm doing really well. My name is Bill Bass. I am from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm in a school district, K-12 school district, right side out of St. Louis. It's Parkway School District. My role there, I too am I often tell people I'm a recovering high school English teacher because I spent most of my career doing that. I'm actually at that halfway point where I was half in the classroom and now I'm just getting to half out of the classroom. So now I serve as a district administrator responsible for innovation, which means lots of things, but the library program, I work with K-12 teachers around technology and digital spaces and literacy, and try to set the stage for them to be able to make really good decisions about how they're using digital tools in their classrooms.
Thank you for joining us. We're also joined by Bettina Shea. How are you doing today and where are you tuning in from?
Hey, Ian. Hi, everybody. I'm doing all right. So as Ian mentioned, my name is Bettina Shea. I'm an associate professor at California State University, Long Beach in the teacher education program. I do secondary literacy there for all of our secondary pre-service candidates across content areas. I am a former English, social studies, and math teacher at the middle school level and a former co-director of the Bay Area Writing Project. My research in relation to the conversation we'll be having today is mainly focused around critical digital literacies and how we can support teacher candidates and also students in engaging with digital literacies in critical ways.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, Kristen Turner, how are you doing today and where are you tuning in from?
It's a great day, Ian, because I'm here talking with my colleagues. I'm so excited to be sharing ideas with all of you. We're all on Zoom and often alone, so this is just a great opportunity. I am professor at Drew University. I'm also director of teacher education there and the director of the Drew Writing Project and Digital Literacies Collaborative. I started my education career as a high school English and social studies teacher that played with technology in the late 1990s and have since become a researcher who looks at how technology influences literacy practices, particularly with adolescents, but with children in their schooling. So I'm just excited for this conversation today.
Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you. To the audience, although this conversation was pre-recorded, we invite your participation in the chat feature or comment section of the social media or website channel you are accessing to view this conversation. So in today's Divergent conversation, we have a very simple question for this illustrious group. Do we know what students need in digital spaces? Anyone want to take a first crack at it? Go for it, Bill.
So I think for as simple a question as that is, it's a really complex, and there's so much nuance to that. And so, you know, I guess the simple answer is yes and no, right? I mean, yes, we absolutely know. We know that there are things that they need, some understandings that we need to, that they are going to need to have. We know that there's some critical thinking skills that go along with being in and using digital tools and being in digital spaces. But at the same time, we also really can't know what their experience is. We can't really know exactly what it is to be a kid in 2022. We can postulate and we can talk to kids and all that, but to actually understand and to live it is dramatically different than actually just talking about it. And I think we can use our experiences to help and to help them understand and feed our understanding. But ultimately, you know, I don't think that there's a really simple way to answer that other than, yeah, we do, and no, we most certainly don't.
Yeah, I think that's a good summation of a lot of important thinking about that. So coming from, you know, critical cultural perspectives, like how would we, why would we get to come in over the top and say, this is what, as you know, students should know about digital literacies, or this is what they need to know how to do. And also, like, how would we even guess, how would we anticipate what sorts of things students are really going to need to know how to do down the line? You know, just looking at the history, thinking about the original information, computing technology kinds of skills, where there was a lot of focus initially on like being able to attach an email or, you know, attach something to email or something like that, sort of like those ICT skills. And then you can do critical sorts of things. Like I've been working a lot with helping kids understand how to make their documents accessible. So not just like, oh, the teacher needs to make this accessible, but like, well, how do you embed these things in your Twitter comments so that more people can access them and so forth. And, but those technologies change, you know, depending on what's going on with them, but also like people's goals are radically different. And then also sometimes what I've also had to struggle with is their goals and my goals. Like sometimes they make me sad what they want to do with digital literacies. I don't know how to talk about that, but like initially, I think when I was coming into this, I was like, well, if we just present all these sources to students and we let them make sense of these issues, that they would arrive at a conclusion that like makes my heart feel good, but they don't always.
Mary, I really like how you acknowledge that things have changed, even in just the short time that all of us have been teaching and researching in this space. And literacy instruction in general tends to take this perspective of what do experts do, which are adults, And then we teach our novices, the children, how to become experts. So expert readers, expert writers. And I think where we're at in terms of digital literacy is that there are no experts. Adults are learning at the same rates that students are. So one of the things that I think complicates this question that you asked us, Ian, is it's not just what do kids need, it's also what adults need. But at the same time, we as adults, like Mary said, like we're trying to guide students in the best way, students or children in the best way possible. But it's complicated, as Bill said.
Uh-oh, you're all frozen. So I'm like, oh no, did I cut out? No, I just wanted to build upon some of the things that Kristen and Mary and Bill have all brought up, because I think when you ask this question, Ian, my initial pause is, who are we, who are students, and what does the word need mean, right? And I think that's come up in everybody's comments, because I mean, who are the we that should know what students need in digital spaces? Like we as the expert panel who's here, we as teachers and educators, we as folks who work with young people, and then who are our students that we're working with, right? Like in my context, I'm working with teacher candidates who then need to know what K-12 students need in digital spaces. And I think those are very different things. And Mary and Kristen both, I think, brought up purpose, right? So I think we all have different purposes. What do we need in order to do what, right? And they both also in the conversation have brought up this idea of technology continues to evolve. So once we say we know something, right, and we know something that someone needs in some particular context, that thing may have changed, right? And so most folks who know me know that I'm a pretty avid tweeter. So I'm on Twitter a lot. And that was really useful when I started tweeting. But now in terms of what students need to know, Twitter is for old folks, right? Like it's for educators. And, I have a really great professional community there. But, when I talk to teenagers, and I have a teenager at home, he's like, yeah, no one uses Twitter, mom. Like that's cool. But yeah, no. So I think that even as we know things, our continuing knowledge needs to evolve. And I think Kristen brought up a really good point about positionality, right? It's in the digital age, we are really shifting our positions, and it's not about expert and learner. It's about co-construction of knowledge for shared purposes or diverse purposes. And this awareness of, well, you can't believe everything you see in technology, right? So where do the experiences that Bill brought up, that we carry help to inform the work that we're doing, because we do have particular expertises, and then where can we learn from a lot of our students who are doing really innovative and important things that we haven't actually thought of, because they can actually mentor us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also would agree with what Kristen said about the need for adults to also become familiar with these digital spaces and grow their knowledge. I think, outside stakeholders, not people in academia, but, your average parent is maybe not as, tech savvy as their child is. And we know, for a fact that an election was tampered with by the Russians, by outside bad actors who used social media to try to further their agenda and try to get people to pull apart, to, sort of divide the camps. So I think what we don't know is we don't know how far to go in terms of helping students to then let the students go home and help their parents or their grandparents. We know that the largest number of people who are likely to just hit share on a Facebook post are people over the age of 60. So it's the older folks who are maybe less digitally savvy than the younger folks. So maybe part of what students need in digital spaces is the agency to go home and teach grandma how to be on Facebook.
I agree, Claire. And that really puts the students as agents in all of this, or the teenagers, the children. I think the Connected Learning Network and Alliance has been doing a lot of great research on that. Students or developing learners need to know or need to have mentors in these spaces. And sometimes they're really good at finding them. And I guess my question is, how do we help them find mentors who can show them that it is okay to have agency to go home and help your parent or your grandma or someone at home like you?
So, Kristen, what that makes me think about is the experiences that we offer kids, or our students, kids being students. Let's talk about students broadly, right? And because ultimately, as you're saying, those parents and grandparents can become students of their children and grandchildren. I think that's a really important thing. But part of our responsibility, I think, with this is to provide them with experiences, a host of experiences along the way. And when being in a K-12 district right now, we're living through this weirdness, and we're seeing almost a backtrack around the way that we want that our teachers and our adults are using technology because of fatigue, because of the fatigue of so much being digital right now. And we can look at it as an opportunity, or we can look at it as an opportunity to regress. And so hopefully we're going to be moving forward with that. But I think that in classrooms, one of the opportunities that we have is to provide our students with a host of experiences and opportunities to make mistakes. And I say this regularly. I want them to make mistakes in front of us because I can help them. We can help them figure it out. Now, that doesn't mean we have to monitor everything that we do or block everything. Like, that's actually, I think, the opposite of our approach. If we're actually trying to help our students make good decisions in their future, it doesn't matter as much what they do in front of us. It has everything to do with what happens when they walk out the door. And so if we're not providing them the experiences and opportunities in our classrooms where we can mentor and we can assist and teach them how to mentor others along the way in these spaces, that's where I think we see some pretty significant issues come up. And it has to do with this, in classrooms, fear of technology for teachers, or fatigue of technology. But going back to that purpose that a number of you have mentioned, that purpose becomes the reason why, and the reason that those digital spaces are important. And I think that we are, if we're not offering those experiences, we're really doing a great disservice to our students broadly.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's interesting too, how, we sort of started the conversation thinking about individuals and their learning, or maybe even, I like the conversation where we renounce the idea that teachers and students are operating separately. Instead, they're like as a community. So, but then Bill's comments just sort of moved out of that and said, part of what people need is supportive policy and context in order to get this off the ground. Because I wondered, I'm like, are people really tired of tech, or are they tired of the contested terrain that like comes along with trying to do technology? And I know like a lot of teachers really had a hard time with the hybrid model that a lot of districts called concurrent, where you have some students were roomers and some Zoomers and that sort of thing. And there was sort of like a big backlash. Like, I know in my public school district, the teachers union said, we'll do remote, or we'll do in person, but we don't want to do those things simultaneously because we haven't been prepared to do it. And so then I've wondered like what kinds of support levers would really be useful in order to like make that less painful, or also some teachers like in Chicago, those teachers wanted to do remote learning, not forever, but just to get over the arc of the latest wave. And then there was all of this backlash around that. and it seems almost regressive. But then I also remembered like people who have taught social studies maybe know more, but like women went into the workplace a lot during World War II. And then after the war ended, then they stopped, right? They were like, oh no, we need to give the jobs back to the men who are fighting, and also like maybe some just being tired of having to rivet and things like that. But then over the long haul, though, that really was a good thing for like helping change the workplace. And so I'm sort of thinking, I'm wondering if there's this backlash, and maybe this regression, but then a gradual sort of coming up that overall will mean good things for digital learning and for digital contexts. And so I've wondered that. I work sometimes with ed leadership people about how to manage this for students with disabilities and what this means in the context of IDA. And so I think people are starting to try and figure it out, but it's, there's problems. It's
like with everything technology over the last 20 years, it's going too slow. Right. I mean, I think that's what, starting back with the new literacies work in the 1990s, it's like, we have to figure this out, but education doesn't work that way. Education is a very slow moving vehicle. You said something really interesting, Mary. You used the phrase "do technology," and that makes me wonder, and it makes me ask all kinds of questions about what does it mean to use technology or do technology? So again, going back to our focus question here, what do students need in these digital spaces? They need authentic opportunities. Like Bill was saying, they need to be shown that the practices they're using for fun and socially outside of school are actually useful in real world digital spaces, and they have a whole bunch of other opportunities they may not know about. But that's not doing technology, right? That's doing literacy practices in the real world. And I find that the idea of infusing technology, and now, like you're saying, we have this backlash, but I would say over the last 20 years, we've had a lot of teachers who just wouldn't do it either. They wouldn't integrate technology into their classroom. Now they kind of had to, but that pushback was always about doing technology, not about doing what's authentic work.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Clarice.
No,
okay,
I'm
I was
sorry.
gonna say, sorry, I was gonna say, one thing that this whole experience is reminding me of is one thing that students need in digital spaces is adequate internet connection, because I'm struggling with that today, friends. So just logistically, but I wanted to build upon Kristen's point about when we consider digital spaces, a lot of the early research in new literacies and the research that has been really innovative in this field doesn't just look at classroom digital spaces. And I think that's because of the authenticity that can be had in and outside of classroom spaces. And if we really, again, I'm going to kind of bring back this idea of positionality. Like if we really are able to take ourselves out of this role as expert and take ourselves out of the traditional hierarchies that education perpetuates and really see the innovative things that students are doing, they can teach us a lot about what they need, and we can be co-learners and co-teachers with them and kind of bring some of these innovative skills into academic spaces, and then bring those academic skills into digital spaces that are outside of classrooms. And I think that that is really important. We keep bringing up this idea of authenticity, right? That if students really need authenticity to engage in digital spaces, our classrooms and our schools, given the slow evolution that Kristen talked about, are they really the places in which we can actually even meet the needs? So even if we know the needs of students in digital spaces, how can we leverage what we need to do in schools to actually support their development of the skills or the competencies or the ways of thinking or the types of access that Bill mentioned earlier to these authentic digital spaces?
It's interesting. Clarice, go ahead.
I was just very quickly, I was just going to say, I think, yeah, it is interesting that, so many times when I'm in schools, teachers really put that divider between digital literacies and then other types of literacies, which are like print literacies, the typical reading and writing and speaking that they think only comes in a book, and that digital literacies becomes this add-on and this other thing that they have to teach. And as Kristen was saying earlier, that, sort of integrating all that together so that all is just literacies, at some point, I guess my hope is that there won't even be the term digital literacies. It's just literacies. It's just a part of what teachers do, and it's all seamlessly integrated.
We've talked a little bit about the early days of the new literacies research, and so we're a little over 10 years into that. And a lot of the initial discussion around what the internet would mean for society, but more importantly for our discussion, what the internet would mean for our classrooms, is we had this belief that it would change everything and it would empower all. I would suggest that that has not entirely come to fruition. I would suggest that this isn't really the internet that we want, or these are not the digital practices or skills that we want. And a couple of you have briefly touched on that. One of the other tensions that we have in our discussion is I have an illustrious group of Divergent Award honorees on this call. And you are the experts in digital literacy and digital practices, but you're telling me that I should be listening to the kids and listening to and watching what the kids are doing. How do we strike that balance? How do we listen to and watch and empower and advocate for youth and digital practices? But then at the same time, as parents or as educators, we're supposed to be there to guide them and protect them when we might not know what we are doing.
So there's this practice that started a long time ago in teacher education called kid watching. And the way that you learn to become a teacher is by watching what the kids were doing and really reflecting on that. So I think that one of the paths to the answer to your question, Ian, is yes, we need to talk to kids. We need to listen to kids. We need to observe what they're doing, but then we need to be reflective about that, but not just reflective, but reflexive, where we are taking our own practices in light of what the kids are doing and coming to some greater understanding. This is one of the reasons why I always include teens, mostly teens or kids, in the research that I do, because it's very difficult to understand digital literacy practices and what's happening and where we want to go. And I do say that with a purpose, kind of going back to Mary's point from earlier, like, we do want good things to come out of this, right? We have goals and intentions as humans and citizens of society. So in order to move forward in a positive way as society, we have to really observe, but also do that through a reflective and a reflexive praxis.
I also think it's important for teachers and parents to not, as Bettina was saying earlier, position themselves as experts. I always advocate for teachers when I'm working with them to not act like they know something when they don't know it. If we as adults, if there's stuff that we don't know, I think it's perfectly fine to ask for help from the classroom, to ask a kid how to do something, or to just, admit I'm learning this alongside you. I'm not really sure how to do this. Mary and I worked on a book together. Our book was, I have it right here in case you want to see it. Our book was about using virtual reality in the English language arts classroom. And, one of the things that we have really come up against is teachers saying, oh my God, are you kidding me? Virtual reality, that's like way out there. I can barely even use the internet. But I think allowing the teacher to say, I don't know how to do that, but that sounds really cool, and let's all learn it together, that can offer a starting point.
Well, and I think that this is well-intended discourse, but I sometimes wonder about the discourse in English language arts teaching around technology, which for a long time was like, technology integration should be seamless and it should be in the background and nobody should notice. And I don't think they really meant that, but like but teachers sometimes are like, well, the technology is going to get in the way. Like they feel like that. And if you can kind of get them to think that, well, it's okay if the technology's got to ride at the front for a minute, because, you know, you're going to have to learn and unlearn and relearn different ways to use different types of, you know, medias and technologies and literacies and things like that. And so actually it's fine to, you know, put that up at the front, and it's not that big of a deal if we talk about like how to use this. So like in some of my teacher education courses, I'm trying to get them to make little videos. And so then we talk about, well, here's all the ways you can get editing programs, and then here's basically how they work. So because all those, no matter what ones you use, there's a few features that are pretty common, and then, you know, let them play, right? And that definitely, like, that puts the technology at the front, and really, especially for a little bit, and takes what else I'm trying to have them figure out, which is procedural text as a genre, because I do have them do how-to videos, because those are all over the internet and kids like them. And so but sometimes I think it's okay to help them push that to the front. And with virtual reality, I've had the same experience with like the cardboard goggles and things like that. Like, it's okay if if it's not seamless.
And I think even more than it just not being seamless is that it's okay, you know, like we have to, as I think about a lot of the teachers that I've worked with over the years, you know, like that permission to be vulnerable with kids, I think is one of those things that, you know, as an administrator, like I try to give my teachers, I try to give them permission to be vulnerable in that way. But I think, you know, Ian, when you were talking about there's a balance, I think that there's absolutely a balance, and it's one that is hard to strike, but it's also one that is ever changing and ever moving. And Mary, to your point, especially like technology, VR specifically, right? It can be a burden. It can get hard to like actually make happen and things like that. But that goes back to those experiences that we want our students to have. And if we don't try, if we just like, you know what, I don't have time for that. I have to get through all my standards. I have to get through all the things that I have to get through. And, you know, plus we have our tests and we have all the stuff that happens in a classroom. Adding, you know, layering on top of that, something that teachers widely might see as experimental, can be really hard. And I think that that's where we as administrators, as people who work with teacher prep programs and do research and all that, that permission, I think, is one of those things that we can actually provide and offer a little grace around just going forward.
Any other thoughts on trying to strike that balance? I didn't want to cut off the discussion. So we're going to close our time. Bettina,
sorry,
go ahead.
Ian,
No, go for
I'm
it.
sorry. I was going to say something and then I wasn't. Okay. So I just wanted to say, just going back to Mary's point, I think one of the things that's really important when we do think about teachers and exploring and making mistakes is, I know several of us are in teacher education, and I think that teachers need models, right? I've done some writing about this, right? Models of how to think through how they use technology, using technology in strategic ways, building their own digital literacy skills. So when we think about how we can support students and think about that balance of supporting students, but also learning from students, we also need to think about what models teachers have, and can new teachers teach some of the more veteran teachers some of these ideas, and can we as teacher educators support that pipeline as well? And so I'm just thinking about another balance, Ian, and I know we don't have time to talk about it today, but the balance between like technology as a tool and real digital literacies, right? Like literacies, and how do we use technology to help us understand and navigate, read the word, read the world in different ways. And so I think those are all kind of balances that we're trying to strike up. So I did just want to throw that in, but not kind of at the end of our conversation because we have no time to talk about it. But that's it for me.
I appreciate that. I think that there is the tension between the doing and the use of technology. There's the practice involved. There's also the opportunity to leverage these tools for change. And as some of our colleagues will talk about, restoring themselves or writing out a new narrative. There's also the very real challenge in the middle of a global pandemic to have balance and think about well-being and mental health as it relates to these social spaces. So I wanted to congratulate all of you for your recognition as Divergent Award honorees. Wanted to thank you for your contributions to the field of literacy and education. I wanted to provide an opportunity for each of you to have a last word, indicate where people can connect with you online if you allow that. And also, what are you currently examining? What gets you really excited right now about these digital spaces and these discussions? Who would like to go first?
How about we just go in reverse order of our introductions, and I'll start us off.
Reverse order. Go ahead, Dr. Turner.
So right now, I'm just going to go with what I'm looking at right now and what gets me excited. Recently, a group of us from the Digital Literacies, I can't remember what it's called, Clarice Commission for ELATE, put out a multimodal assessment framework for looking at writing and for having students getting involved in their own assessment of writing. And so writing lots of times undergirds the work that I do and thinking about writing in digital spaces. But right now I'm excited because I am co-researching with my daughter, and actually Ian is part of this group. A couple of other literacy researchers have included their children, and a group of us are working with our kids, our literal flesh and blood children, to better understand how parents can talk with kids and what parents need to know. So kind of connected to this, what do kids need to know? It's what do parents need to know to help their kids, and how can we kind of leverage our intersectional identities, our positionalities across researcher, teacher, and parent to help others and ourselves. So that's what I'm excited about.
Dr. Shea, what are you working on? What are you very excited about right now?
Okay, so of course, the trash truck that I mentioned earlier in the chat to folks is now passing right in front of my window, but I'm going to try this. If you can hear it, let me know. Shelby can cut that out of the video later. So I am really excited in this field. I have explored a lot of critical media and critical digital literacies. That's really what I am excited about generally. And then looking at how teachers use Twitter to establish and maintain kind of professional communities. But one of my more recent pieces looks at kind of critical digital literacies in terms of anti-Blackness and anti-Blackness and patriarchy. And I'm really, really proud of a piece that just came out in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy with my colleague Tasha Austin. And we look at that, the ways in which we can use multimodal forms of literacy to really challenge anti-Blackness and anti-feminist kind of traditional canonical texts, and how we can bring more diverse voices in. And so that's been a really, really important part of my work across both ELA and world languages spaces, right? So kind of considering this broad notion of literacy and how we can look at digital literacies in more critical ways. And then of course, how we can support teachers in becoming teachers of more critically aware and more strategic digital literacy things. And you all can connect with me on Twitter at Prof. Shea. That's where I usually am digitally. So that's the best way to connect with me.
Thank you very much. Bill Bass, what gets you excited right now?
There's really three things right now that I'm paying attention to deeply. First one is where are we going? Where do we go from here? We're in this strange time, and when I look at our classrooms, and we kind of talked about the fatigue that we're feeling, I'm really interested in learning about and thinking about just what is it that is, where do we go? What do we need now? You know, we talk about well-being a lot, and we talk about social and emotional pieces, and I think those are keys to it. But how do we continue to move forward? I also like to think, though, and this has been ongoing for a number of years, just the difference between using using those digital spaces in terms of what we want our students to be as opposed to what we want them to do. And I think that is, you know, that lends itself to the use of in our digital world and physical world, the melding of those two things. Like, really, what do we want them to be? What we want them to do is important, but who we want them to be in their futures, and you know, for our society, and the makeup of how we will interact with each other going forward. I just, that B piece is really important for me. And then as far as finding me online, it's Bill Bass almost everywhere. So I'm pretty easy to find, except I am not the forensic psychologist. Just know that that's the more famous Bill Bass.
That threw me for a loop. Thank you for that. Dr. Rice, where are you, and what gets you excited in your work right now?
I'm excited about a lot of things. So some of the things I've been working on is supporting teachers in evaluating digital instructional materials. So thinking about frameworks for helping them decide what it is they want to use. So I feel like there was a supermarket sweep, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, where you're just pulling stuff off shelves, and you use it because somebody recommended it or because it was easy to access. But then were you thinking about, was it accessible? So did it engage the students? Does it advocate for inclusion? And then what about accountability in terms of like user and data privacy? So was there any intent to, connect to standards, anything like that? And so just thinking about helping them vet materials using that framework with those 4 items. Had some pieces published about that. Also, because of digital and online learning and how much work I've done in charter schools, and especially with students with disabilities and with fully on learning even before it was cool. So I think a lot about making healthy spaces for parents and teachers to collaborate, because I do think that going into digital spaces means that you're going to have to interact with parents more. And that, besides the internet connection thing, was probably the biggest struggle for teachers, because they're like, the historical narrative of the institution of school is that the school says what they want people to do, and then people are just supposed to do it. And when you went into these remote spaces, especially with the havoc of the pandemic, then people couldn't or wouldn't do those things. And also there was lovely stuff that came out of it, because a lot of the teachers I worked with were like, well, I felt weird sitting in my space telling the children this is the way the world is, when they're in their space when it's not that way. Right? Like, just thinking about cultural responsiveness and things like that. And so there was more space for families and parents to push back. And I think we're seeing, a real backlash in that in some ways. And we want all the parents to participate, not just some parents, which has been historically what has happened. And so, but we got to figure out where we can get into places where we're not having, these incendiary school board meetings, and where people are refusing to do online learning or refusing to do, certain things. And so I have some writing I've been doing about that as well. And also I wanted to tell people that in terms of K-12, for the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, Don Zancanella and I are the column editors for the policy column. And so if there's somebody who listening or among you who wants to write about something related to policy, then go ahead and contact me. And then also, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Online Learning Research, which is put out by it's AACE, AACE, and then Site. And so if you're working on something, anybody out there or in here and want to send it out or ask a question, then we can do that. We have a really great special issue coming out. Karen Miller is guest editing about social emotional learning in K-12 online learning. And so hope to see people there too.
Thank you very much. Dr. Moran, last but not least, what gets you excited about your work or this field?
Yeah, like all of you, there's so many things. Oh my gosh, I get just really excited about too many things. I have a couple of things coming out. So I think Mary and Kristen both have helped contribute to a special themed edition of English education that'll be coming out soon in the next month or two. And this focuses specifically on online learning spaces during the pandemic, what people did early on. When we first conceived of this idea, it was the beginning days and we thought things would be over, but yet here we are. So anyway, that was put together with members of the Digital Literacies in Teacher Education Commission, which is an elite commission of NCTE. I also have a book coming out in April from Routledge. It's called Next Level Grammar for a Digital Age. And my co-authors on that are Darren Krovitz and Michelle Devereaux. And we look at some of these issues of critical media literacy and how to leverage digital tools to teach grammar and language usage in digital spaces. And then in terms of what are the big questions that I'm thinking about for the future, I'm really fascinated by the proliferation of TikTok. And I was asking some of my students yesterday in class if they use TikTok, and some do and some don't. So I'm really interested in doing more research on how we might leverage, the affordances and constraints of social media practices of students and how they use those really to shape their identities. Those who are TikTokers, what does that say about them in those digital spaces? How do they put that identity forth? And why do some choose to engage and some don't? That also is a question of identity. So I can be reached at Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Clarice Moran. And I'm just really grateful to have been here. So thank you for all of it.
Thank you very much. Congratulations again to each of you for your recognition as a Divergent Award honoree and all your contributions to the field. Thank you for joining us and watching this video.